I'd like to acknowledge that this episode of the Teach New South Wales podcast was recorded at Parramatta Public School on the homelands of the Darug people. I'd like to pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today. Welcome to the Teach New South Wales podcast, a podcast by teachers for teachers. Hi everyone, I'm Katie.
And I'm Maddie.
And we're your hosts for today's episode of the Teach New South Wales podcast. Maddie, it's our first time on the couch together, just the two of us.
Yes.
How are you feeling?
Very keen, very excited to be here and to share some of our experience in our teaching journeys. How about you? How are you feeling?
Excited to be here. Happy to have some conversations about what it's like to be a beginning teacher. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're talking about today?
Yeah, so today we are going to be taking you through the first 5 years of our teaching journeys, including some of the key milestones of what you can expect in your first 5 years of teaching, and also talking about and reflecting on some moments that surprised us in our first 5 years of teaching.
Absolutely. And I'm really keen today to be sharing insight on what it's like to be a secondary teacher. And I'm also really looking forward to hearing a bit more of a primary perspective from you. So I think as we talk today, though, it's really important to just remember that these first few years can look really different for everyone. We definitely grow at different paces throughout.
Yes.
And just having that mindset of continual learning and continual growth is really important at this time. Let's get started. So what did you notice about the first year of teaching?
Yeah, so in my first year, one of the big things that stood out to me was building foundations. And what comes with this is learning routines. Learning routines are so important to be set up day one, the moment that you receive your class, because you need to set your students up for success. Students need to know what to expect from you and what to expect in the classroom environment, in your classroom. What I like to do is I like to make it very clear, set those expectations straight away, and talk to my students about how to enter the classroom, what I would like them to do before I mark the roll. And that in a primary school setting means putting their pencil case on the desk and coming and sitting on their floor with their legs crossed before I mark the roll in the morning. And keeping routines consistent every day throughout the year just means that students know what to expect when they come to school each day and when they're learning in your classroom.
I really liked making that a bit of a collaboration sometimes with your class as well, like being able to have a bit of a discussion, definitely with your more senior classes, in my case anyway, having a bit of a discussion of what do we want our classroom to look like together and really building that tone and the dynamic of the classroom together. So getting a bit of student buy-in from that, I always found really valuable.
Yeah.
The other thing, if I think about my first year, and this was something that I was really excited about, and also something that really helped me stay organized, was my teacher diary. I remember being so excited when I got that diary on my first week with my own class and being able to use that to organize myself. And that's obviously across what you're doing in each period for me, day to day, across a week, and even across a term. It's just something that I really felt grounded me in what I needed to be doing as a first year teacher.
Love my teacher diary, and I've also recently transitioned over the last few years into using an online teacher diary system, which has been so handy and useful, especially being able to just access this on my laptop in professional learning and wherever I can take it with me throughout the school.
And I think another thing, once you've got your routines established, once you're feeling a little bit more organized, in your case, was it like behavior and the management, classroom management, that kind of started to come next, do you think?
Yeah, so behavior and classroom management, another really big thing to think about in the first year of teaching. Another thing that I did with my class, very similar to setting up expectations, is holding a class discussion with my students. So when it comes to setting behavior expectations in my primary classroom, I would start by modeling to students and verbally telling them what my expectations are of the class. Things like, my expectations are that you put up your hand before speaking, or that you use kind manners in the classroom.
Absolutely.
And then I would open that conversation up to the class so that we could have a collaborative discussion together and share ideas of what we would like our whole class expectations, behavior expectations to be together. And it's a really great way to get student voice and student agency in setting up those classroom behavior expectations. And what I really love to do as well is to type up all of the expectations onto a large document. And I display this in the classroom so that students can then all sign, we call it a contract, and then it holds us all accountable for making sure that we're all learning in a positive learning environment.
I love that. It must be really nice as a primary teacher to be able to have that one group of students that you're really kind of focusing on. That's something that I think would be really nice.
Yes.
I think it's almost similar in some ways, but also can be quite different. I think about when I'm kind of setting up class intentions and getting on top of agreed upon and established behaviours across the secondary space. And I think that something that's quite unique about the secondary space is having that flexibility to move and to adapt all of these learnings that you've studied at university across different contexts. So, how I'm setting up a year 7 classroom would look quite different to how I'm setting up a year 12 classroom. And that's something that I really enjoy about being a secondary teacher, the
Mm.
fact that your day can look quite different across, your 5 or 6 periods. I think another thing that kind of comes to mind for me when I think back to my first year out are achieving some really key milestones
Yes.
along the way. I loved setting my first assessment for my
Assessments,
classes
yes.
and then looking to mark that as well. And I think that that's something that you really start diving a little bit deeper in during that first year. I worked really closely with more experienced teachers in my faculty, so in the English or the history faculty, and really learnt from them. And something that really stands out to me is the more you do that, the more you feel like you're achieving these first year teaching milestones. So the assessments, the marking, and the
Mhm.
reporting as well. And it's really just starting to round you out as feeling like the teacher in the room and that established teacher voice there.
And I think what comes from achieving some of these key milestones is developing your confidence in your teaching practice and helps shape your teacher identity into your future teaching years as well.
Absolutely. And I think that confidence is key, isn't it? Particularly as you near the end of your first year and that all starts coming together. That's a really nice moment in your first year. Is there anything, thinking back, that surprised you a little bit about that first year out of university?
I think what surprised me is the importance of finding your support person. So, my example for this is in a primary school, we usually have what we call classroom neighbors, and these are the teachers that teach right next door to us. My classroom neighbor that I was set up next to in my first year of teaching ended up becoming such a key person and even like a mentor for me. And by having this support person, I could go to her at the end of each teaching day and just debrief on how the day went. And it was just really nice to be able to share those feelings and those moments with somebody else that could relate to how the teaching day is. It was also really nice to have somebody that I could bounce ideas off and I could ask questions to if I wasn't sure how to approach a particular lesson. And just having that support network really fueled my confidence and helped me feel like I really could tackle each day. And so she helped instill that confidence in myself.
I definitely had that too. I was really lucky my first year out. One of my friends from university, we got appointed to the same school as first year teachers, and we had a little bit of a commute each morning and afternoon. And that time was really valuable to just be able to get us prepared for the day and also to debrief anything that happened during that afternoon drive as well.
And in teaching, because it is such a team effort, you really do end up developing some lifelong friendships with your colleagues, which is such a beautiful part of the job as well.
Yeah, I think another thing that's really important to note during that first year is that being able to lean on your mentor teachers is such a valuable opportunity. I had two early career teacher mentors at my school. They were both from different key learning areas. So one was in Hizzy and one was in Kappa, and they would jump in on my classes, usually on a fortnightly basis, and just give me a few key tips and tricks. And I can still remember exactly what they were. And I used those throughout my practice to really build those foundational things that I was missing at the time. And it was so valuable just to have that experienced teacher insight there.
Yeah, and one of the benefits of working for the public education system in New South Wales is that we do have so much support available for beginning teachers. We have mentors in schools, we have statewide staff rooms, we have online professional learning, so a range of resources and supports and tools that help beginning teachers on their early career teaching journeys. My beginning teacher mentor played such a vital role in observing my practice and giving me feedback on my lessons, because it's very different going from being a prac student to then having full responsibility of your own class. You're on your own now. So by having a mentor who can come into the room, watch your lessons, team teach with you, is such a valuable experience and a valuable opportunity that we have as part of our Department of Education system.
So I think if we try to take ourselves back to how we were feeling many, many years ago when we were first stepping into the classroom, I remember you have finished your studies and you have such a wealth of knowledge that you've learnt from your university degree, from the placements that you've done. Maybe you've done a little bit of work as a school learning support officer and you're really excited to jump into it. And I think as we step foot into the classroom that first year, we are so mindful of the graduate standards that we're working towards. And particularly me, I know that I went in ready to master knowing my students and knowing my content as well. So really being on top of those first two professional standards and working to completely embed them into my practice.
Yeah. We're now transitioning into our second year of teaching. We are still an early career teacher and we're still learning. We're still learning. So when I got to my second year of teaching, this is when I started to feel a little bit more confident and independent, especially in sharing ideas and resources with my colleagues. I think back to my first year of teaching, I felt really timid and shy in sharing ideas with my team members on my grade. But by my second year, because I did feel more confident in my practice, I was sharing my resources that I was using in my maths lessons, and I was sharing great strategies and ideas that I was using in my reading lessons. And I really loved that I was able to collaborate more, I guess, effectively with my team members across my grade, across the stage.
I think as well, as you are starting to become more independent and you're starting to share all of that information and those resources with your colleagues, a lot of that is because you've got that foundation from your first year. So you've already spent that time learning about the school culture, learning about the routines across your school and working in that system. So suppose you're working on a lot more familiar territory, and that does give you the confidence and the knowledge to then be able to step forward and say, I have this idea and I'm ready to share it. And I think for me, a key skill that I kept developing across that second year as well was differentiation and knowing that the students that come to my classroom are coming with a range of different abilities and a range of different learning preferences. Particularly, my first year out was and my second year out as well was at a partially selective high school. So working with students that were coming in as high potential and gifted learners, right through to students that did require some adjustments and did require some support with their learning. And I think it was in that second year that I really got to understand how to do that effectively and how to do that in a way that was really time smart, I suppose. What I started doing and what I took from other teachers who were sharing with me, and then I suppose what I was able to share back as well, was setting up each lesson so that it has multiple access points to the learning so that all students or most students can come into that and access that. And then also working with just understanding that you can provide your students with choice in the lesson. And that choice can mean that you're catering for a wide range of learning needs from the onset.
Yeah, and that all comes back to knowing your students and how they learn. I think in my second year of teaching, I started learning how to use data more effectively. We have all of these different types of assessments. We have formative assessments, summative assessments, assessment. And in my first year of teaching, there was so much to take on and so much to think about. But by the time I reached my second year of teaching, then I felt like I had the skills and the confidence and the knowledge to be able to use all of this together effectively. It also helped me when it came to reporting time because I had an accurate understanding of where my students were at in their learning and what their next steps in learning were. And I could trial different platforms for collecting and using data. So I trialed using Excel spreadsheets, and this was a really great way for me to visually see where all my students were at across all the key learning areas. And I could visually see which students needed more support in a particular area in reading, who needed further extension in mathematics. And like I said, with reporting, it helped me accurately report back to parents on students' learning journeys.
I actually undertook some professional learning on that around my second and third year as well. I think as an English teacher, I'm definitely more comfortable with words than with numbers. So being able to do a little bit of training on how to use that data effectively, I felt like was a really valuable thing for me to do at that early stage as well. I think as you do start to move maybe more towards the end of your second year or into your third year of teaching, the other thing that starts to come, and this is a really probably a milestone point when it does come, is developing your teacher identity. And by that, I suppose I mean that you feel like when you step into a classroom, you're acting as your authentic teacher self. I think definitely in a high school setting, the students know when we're being, true to who we are and when we're being ourselves within a lesson. And
Yeah.
it's a really nice landmark to know that you can step into a classroom and you have that teacher presence. So you have that with itness that we learn about at uni, and you know what's going in all pockets, what's going on in all pockets of the room.
Yeah.
And you step in and there's an established tone and the students understand the routines that you've set up. And for me, even if that might be not my own class, maybe I'm stepping into another class for the day, because you've kind of established yourself across the school by this point as well, that can start coming naturally to your teaching presence too.
And I think it's important not to compare yourself to others because everybody's teacher identity is different. So think about how you develop your own teacher identity because your identity is going to look different to the person who is teaching next door to you, to the person who has been teaching for 20 years. So as long as you remain true to yourself and you remain your authentic self, then that's what is most important.
And that comes with experience, doesn't it? And that can take your first 2 years to build. It's just important that you're consistently working to define that and working to establish that with your students. Another thing I want to touch on as well is the pretty landmark achievement of receiving your proficient teacher accreditation at that 2 to 3 year mark as well. How did you find that?
Yeah, so it was my second year of teaching that I started working towards my proficient teacher accreditation status. And this is usually the time that most early career teachers in their second year of teaching will start working towards this. It was a big process, but really it was just a collection of data and evidence of all of the things that I was already implementing in my own classroom. What I do recommend to anyone, especially pre-service teachers, is if you don't already have a firm understanding on the Australian professional standards for teachers, is get to know them back to front now because you are going to be referring to these throughout your whole career. You're going to be referring to them when you complete your proficient teacher accreditation because you need to demonstrate that you are working at a proficient teacher level. And when you complete your PDP cycle each year, you need to map your evidence and your goals against the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers. If you work towards highly accomplished and lead teacher, you need to show that you're working towards these levels in the Australian Professional Standards for Teachers.
I'm going to sound like an English teacher for a moment here, so just go with me. But I think that maybe we can kind of summarize what we're talking about across this year 1 to year 3 level with a bit of language analysis. So when we leave university, we are working to graduate standards, right? And I suppose as graduates, you're building blocks, you're building the foundations. And then proficient, you are working to a higher level. You have achieved the next step and the next level across the board from all of our 7 graduate standards. But in saying that, Obviously, you're still an early career teacher.
Mhm.
It's more than okay to not know everything at that time. You have reached a stage in your career where I think you probably, definitely for me anyway, I was more comfortable in what I was doing. I
Mm.
felt more confident. I felt more established, but there's
Mm.
still so much room to grow. We know that as teachers, I think we all come to the profession with that sense of lifelong learning is fundamental. And I
Mm.
think while you've got these building blocks set up, there's still always next steps, and there's still always room to grow and room to improve there.
Yeah. And I think that's where you might start thinking about taking yourself from, thinking of yourself as a classroom teacher to moving into thinking of yourself as a whole school teacher. Katie, can you talk to us a bit more about what a whole school teacher means and maybe how this transitions into your third year of teaching?
Yeah, and perhaps in year 2 and 3, you start to dip your toe into the water a little bit and you start moving beyond a focus that's more insular to your classroom, and you start looking outwards towards what else can you be contributing to or working to expand your skills across the whole school.
Mm.
And I think that at that point, we start moving away from positioning ourselves as a classroom teacher, working to establish that foundation, to a whole school teacher where you do have the knowledge and the skill to move outside of your classroom and work to contribute across the entire school.
Absolutely. And we know that schools don't run without all of the efforts and contributions that teachers put into extracurricular activities and opportunities for students as well. So, in a primary school, we've got sporting teams, the choir, we've got a debating team. And all of those can't run without the efforts and the amazing work and time that teachers put into these extracurricular activities.
And I think it's really in year 4 and 5 and onwards that that starts to become much more of a focus to your own teaching development. I think we know that as teachers, pretty much from the onset, we do wear so many hats. But I suppose as you move outside your classroom and into all these extracurricular, or it might look like leadership, it might look like wellbeing initiatives, those different hats potentially start to fit a little bit better or
Mm.
become a bit more comfortable for you as
Yeah.
well.
And I wanted to touch on leadership a little bit here. And I wanted to give a bit of advice to early career teachers or even experienced teachers. If leadership is something that you are interested in, I highly recommend you to start having those conversations with people in your school, including your mentor, including your principal, and make it known that that is something that you are interested in pursuing. This is something I sat down and had a conversation with my principal about, and I told my principal that I was interested in pursuing leadership. And this is how I moved into my PBL role and into eventually a relieving assistant principal role at my school.
And I think it's also worth thinking about too that although you are, developing so quickly at this point and you might be feeling really confident, professional learning is still just as important. And we
Mhm.
know that teaching is such a career where we need to reflect and we need to be open to feedback and how
Mm.
that feedback is going to help us take the next step. So
Mm.
definitely still have conversations with for me, your head teachers or your senior executive staff on what areas of your practice do you want to continue to develop? Where do you want to keep learning? And definitely take the opportunities to find those and continue to refine how you're working there.
And teaching is reflective. And something that I always say is we are always learning, we are lifelong learners. So take on board that feedback, be reflective. And as you said, look into professional learning to better your own practice, which then benefits the learning of the students in your class.
And I think the really good news, the really exciting news is by that year 4, year 5 point, you are starting to feel so confident and you're
Mm.
starting to be a voice in any classroom, in your faculty. You're starting to take on and train potentially placement students or early career teachers because you do have that confidence to go forth.
Yeah.
And I think as you are focusing on your professional learning, the importance of the PDP framework or your performance and development plan is really important as well, because that allows you the opportunity to actually identify these are my key goals. These are the things that I feel like I am still working to develop and the things that I would like to focus on. And it's a great way to then advocate for yourself and say, this is the support I need. These are the steps that I need to take to achieve that
Mm.
and to reach that next level of my proficiency,
Mm.
and even look to becoming a HALT teacher, a highly accomplished lead teacher as well.
Absolutely. And that's why it's in these first few years of teaching that we're focusing on learning, refining, and consolidating our practice.
And as we think about, I suppose, mastering our craft across year 4 and 5 and onwards, what do you think are some of the differences between our two contexts as a primary teacher compared to a secondary teacher?
I think in a primary school teachers need to be masters of teaching all key learning areas from English to maths to science to history. We also need to have a very good, solid understanding of the syllabus and the content across all of these key learning areas from early stage 1 all the way up to stage 3. So, as a primary school teacher, when we're talking about finding our confidence in our teaching practice, when we move stages or grades, so for example, moving from an early stage 1 teacher, a kindergarten teacher, to a stage 3 year 6 teacher, all of that can feel like almost starting from scratch, where you have to understand the syllabus and the content for this new grade. You need to develop new resources, but this is where it's really important that we share our ideas and our knowledge and our resources and rely on our colleagues, because as we've talked about, teaching is a team effort.
I think for me, this point is the point where you really start to hone into your specialty subject area and really get comfortable with your syllabus there. And something that I set as a goal for myself in these years, year 4 and year 5, was to start undertaking HSE marking.
Mm.
And my first year of HSE marking, I was marking the English standard paper. And that really allowed me the chance to understand my syllabus more strongly, to understand the different texts that were being studied at different schools, and to start really benchmarking my students and my texts across what was happening across the state more generally.
By your fourth and fifth year of teaching, where you probably do feel really confident with the syllabus and your content knowledge, this is where you might start thinking about embedding key learning areas into other cross curriculum opportunities. So you might start trialing how to embed literacy into drama lessons, for example.
I think that that's maybe something that's similar on the secondary side of the fence as well. And I remember when I got really confident in my English teaching skills, I started thinking about how can I integrate numeracy into English
Mm.
to a higher level. And I think that also means that you can start developing that whole child focus as
Yeah.
well, looking to round out their skills as a student. And because I'm, covering English, that also means collaborating more widely with other faculty areas as
Mm.
well, and looking at how we can find connection points between what we're studying to really make that a logical flow on the point of the student.
Yeah, and you might even start thinking about trialing new behavior management strategies. So, there may have been strategies and things that you've been using throughout your career so far. This might be the time that you start trialing something new and seeing what works for you and what works for your students and what works for your class. Because remember, the students in our class are going to be different each year.
Yeah, and I just really want to kind of call out there for secondary teachers that maybe a hallmark challenge of the secondary space is how many students you might be teaching across any given year. So for me, I think each year would have been over 100 students, and
Mm.
really working on how you can understand each of those students individually and how you can make sure that you are meeting them where they are and then working to progress them to get them where they need to be as well.
Mm.
We might spend some of our initial years really dipping our toe into the water of these different areas of a school. And I think that what starts to come in that fourth or fifth year is you start to be able to really take ownership and take initiative of that area as well. So I remember I always was quite passionate about the wellbeing space, and I would always find opportunities to be involved where I can. And at the start, that maybe looked like being a bit of a mentor for one or two students and working to support them. But then by the time I was in my fourth and fifth year, I was a year advisor. So I was leading the transition from primary across to the secondary school space. So working on planning with our primary feeder schools and how we could best cater for our students as they came in, leading sessions with parents to make sure that they kind of had a handle on what that transition would look like, and then working with teachers across the school as well to really make sure that they were well prepared for this new cohort of year sevens that we were going to have coming our way. So I suppose you go from a little bit of a feeler to really being the main person and the lead within those spaces.
Yeah. And it was in my fourth year of teaching that I moved into a relieving assistant principal role. And this gave me a lot of insight into whole school planning initiatives and working as part of the school executive team and some of the behind the scene decisions that go into how a school runs effectively and efficiently.
So I think that in both of our experiences, we probably spent those first few years building foundations there. So developing our skills, developing our understanding of the content we were teaching, developing our understanding of how we can get to know our students and how we can establish our teacher voice and teacher identity in the classroom. And then I think we both probably started to look outward to engage in those whole school programs. But I think that not everyone's journey looks like that. And I think for some people that might happen earlier in the piece,
Yeah.
or some also might prefer to spend their time really refining those skills and focusing on becoming experts at their craft as well. And I think that we really need to make sure we're always focusing on the idea that we're looking for progress across each of these 5 years, progress rather than perfection, I suppose.
The first 5 years are all about growth and continual learning, right?
Absolutely. And I think that as we are continually learning across that period, it's so important to remember our why we do what we do,
Yeah.
and the sense of purpose that comes with the teaching profession. I think that it is one of the most special jobs in the world. And I think really as you're continuing to grow and develop, coming back to that sense of purpose that all teachers, I think, share.
hmm
That's all for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Teach New South Wales podcast, where we explore the dynamic world of education. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to be notified when new episodes become available. You can find us on social media via our handle @Teach New South Wales. Until next time, keep learning, keep teaching, and keep making a difference. This podcast is produced by the Teach New South Wales team from the New South Wales Department of Education.